Welcome to the Culture of Writing podcast, where writers, editors, and content strategists from Salesforce talk about how we work together to improve our craft and make content better. I attended my first Dreamforce where I met Nick and Amy, who are joining us today, and it was a memorable experience. So we want to talk about the experience and things that we can do better on the accessibility front.
And I am Amy Wood. I work in the Office of Accessibility at Salesforce, and my focus is making sure that our events, transportation, and real estate are accessible to people with disabilities and medical conditions. This was my third Dreamforce, but the best one that we ever had, because I got to meet you too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Gray. I am a Revenue Operations Director at Inspirus. It is an HR tech company out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We focus on increasing employee engagement and driving down employee retention through rewarding and recognizing employees. This was my first Dreamforce to attend. I should mention that we are longtime Salesforce customers and really enjoy our partnership with Salesforce. I actually do have a disability too as well. It's a rare form of macular degeneration, and it was quite nerve-wracking attending an event like this. But Amy and Stan were just absolutely amazing in making my first Dreamforce a memorable one. And kind of alleviating a lot of those fears that I had going into such a massive event with a disability.
Yeah, well, thank you. Let's branch out from that a little bit, and if we could, and Nick, I know you touched on the your macular degeneration, but if we could elaborate a little bit on the various what we're dealing with, right? And beyond Dreamforce, right, which Amy innovated, I think, in creating this accessibility group, which, I signed up for it having no idea what I would be doing or what it was, and it was just a great sign up. It was a phenomenal experience. But talk about yourselves a little bit and describe that. And there's the event, and there's also kind of using Salesforce day to day, using software day to day. Does that make sense? Can we talk a little bit about that from both of you?
Ladies first.
So I do want to add that this is Amy speaking. I am deaf. I lost all of my hearing at 5 months old when I had spinal meningitis. And so I don't know sign language, so I have learned to rely on lip reading to communicate. So that is one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about accessibility and disability inclusion. As I mentioned, I am deaf, and so I know that that is not immediately apparent to a lot of people. I think a lot of people assume that deaf people will be using sign language only, or deaf people don't speak. So that has made it difficult sometimes to navigate when people forget that I'm deaf, or they don't know, they won't look at me directly, or they don't believe me that I'm deaf, so they don't want to help me get the accommodation that I need. But working for Salesforce has been one of the best experiences because disability inclusion aligns with a lot of our values, including trust and customer success. So even when somebody doesn't know I'm deaf, they are so open to learning more. They're so open to making sure that I have what I need to succeed, not only in work, but also at Dreamforce, or also going to events like team dinners and things like that.
Thanks, Amy. And to piggyback off of that is, disabilities come in all shapes, forms, and sizes. If you look at me, and I think both of you experienced this, you probably wouldn't know that I have a visual impairment. But I had a very, very rapid decline in vision loss from the ages of 13 to 15. Luckily, it's leveled out, and I thank God every single day that I still have enough vision to function. People always have it worse, and I think we need to remind ourselves that we need to be grateful for what we have and what we don't have. So, it affects me every single day of my life. I've learned to cope with this through the world of academia, through professional, personal, whatever endeavors I'm going through. I just have to function a little bit differently. And it took me a long time to accept it and to talk about it. I would say probably into my 30s is when, I didn't hide the fact that I had that because I could hide it, if I really wanted to. But, ultimately too, as well, people that I work with closely, like they're going to notice things, whether I have extremely enlarged font, have to use magnifiers, screen readers, whatever the case it is. I don't want people to fear what they don't understand or what they don't know. So I will explain what I deal with. I don't think anyone ever really knows the depths of, how it affects my day-to-day life. But I think it's empowering and liberating to be okay with it and comfortable. And not everyone is comfortable with it. There are stages of, coping that you go through when you deal with this. Obviously, Amy, dealt with something at 5 months old, so it was, kind of a baseline. I had 20/20 vision until I was 13 years old, and you think about that, that's crazy enough of losing vision at that very, very odd time of being an adolescent boy. It took me a while to kind of come out of a dark place and, kind of being angry of like, why would God do this to me? Ultimately, I chose the path of not being the victim. And how do I be an example for people with disabilities on how to function? Something at Dreamforce that was extremely, eye-opening for me was hearing Mike Hess's story of, we had similar paths and eye conditions, a little bit different, to the severity. But it was just really, really cool to see that Salesforce was celebrating people at Dreamforce, because to be quite honest with you, it's an afterthought at best at events of this size. And to hear it right off the bat in the main keynote just hit me like a lightning bolt, because it was like, oh my God, like we're not these weird people that we put in the corner. It's actually celebrated and embraced. And it gave me a great feeling as a man with a disability to know that I was at an event hosted by a company that truly cared about people with disabilities.
Yeah, and Mike Hess's story, at the keynote that you're referencing, he had a very similar story. Yeah, I don't know how old he was when that happened, but I think it was a similar arc, was it? Or was it something that was earlier onset?
I think it was slightly earlier onset. Don't quote me. I don't want to, butcher his story or anything like that. But again, selfishly, you always think about like, okay, oh my God, this guy had a somewhat of a parallel journey, and look at how amazing he's doing. Look at what he's doing in the community and how he's, kind of leading, being a flag bearer for this mission to, let people know that people with disabilities are very, very capable of being fully functioning, citizens, very employable, and they can do some amazing things too that, probably people that don't have disabilities just probably can't do either. He talked a lot about having superpowers, and I never really thought about it like that. I don't feel like I really have any, but like one of the interesting stories that I have is I'm a scratch golfer. And I'm almost legally blind. And people are like, how is that possible? Well, come on the golf course and we'll find out, No, I'm joking. But like, I have to play golf purely by feel. I can see the ball for probably about, I don't know, maybe 100 feet, 150 feet at best. And then I lose track of it. But I truly have this weird sixth sense where I can just like feel the way that the golf ball comes off the club face and where it is. So anyway, people are surprised by that, but it's stories like that I feel like, kind of bring the disability out of the dark. And oh my gosh, that person can not only, function, but they can excel at things too. And I think that that's what people need to know more than anything.
That was incredible. And just to highlight that the keynote at Dreamforce is the largest AI technology conference in the world. And in the keynote, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, brought Mike Hess on stage as a super user, right? That's really because he's done all these amazing things for his nonprofit with Salesforce, and talked about his journey from the corporate world into the nonprofit world. And he got a iconic Salesforce what is it, badge of honor. It's called
Golden
the
hoodie.
Golden Hoodie, which is something that looks like it's out of the Wizard of Oz. It's really beautiful, and he was awarded that. And it's a very prestigious thing, which was new to me, being new to Salesforce. So that's what Nick is talking about. I wanted to just ask a couple more things. One thing, and again, talk about only what you're comfortable talking about, of course. But one thing that Nick just mentioned, and Amy, you've mentioned it too, and that I didn't know, is you would never know, either one of you. You know, you're running the accessibility operation at Dreamforce, Amy, and of course I met Nick. But like as you say, looking at you, interacting with you, speaking with you, I would have had no clue. Right? I eventually came to understand it. But how does that work in the world for you? The fact that you've touched on it a little bit. If you don't mind elaborating on that, I think that would be interesting for people.
So that's actually something that I really related to Nick about, was when we were riding to dinner, we were just talking about our experiences as people with disabilities, but we do appear to be non-disabled. And growing up in high school and being one of the only kids in school with a disability, I think it really made us feel isolated in some areas. And I really love what Nick was talking about. As you get older, you learn to take ownership of your disability and really focus on the things that you can do. And you are right. A lot of people don't know that I'm disabled when they first meet me. They often think I just have an accent. They always ask me, where are you from? Are you from Europe? Or, well, I can't put my finger on it. And I used to say I'm from Manchester, England, because I didn't want to say I'm deaf, because 9 times out of 10, the response would always be, oh, I'm so sorry, that must be horrible for you. Or they would just get visibly so uncomfortable when I say I have a disability. They feel like they've called it out. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to just lean into it and I say, I'm deaf. I lost all of my hearing at 5 months old. And most people are just really surprised and really impressed by that I've learned to communicate in a hearing world. The world is not set up for people with hearing loss. And I think we often forget that it's not us that's disabled, it's society that disables us. Society does not build things so that it's accessible to people with disabilities. And one other thing that Nick and I were talking about is, when we are navigating the airport and trying to board the gate or something, we both like to sit in the accessible seating area. I prefer it so that I can hear when the plane is boarding. I don't want to miss my flight, so I sit in the accessible seating area. But so many people have come up to me and said, you can't sit here. This is for people with disabilities. Or if they don't say anything, then they're giving me dirty looks, and we can feel it. And then we start to feel bad. We feel like we're taking away, sorry, Nick, I don't want to speak to you, but I feel like I'm taking away a seat from somebody who really needs it. So that's made it really difficult to navigate sometimes. And then you start to wonder, should I be here? Should I move? But then I don't want to miss my flight. So I started wearing a baseball cap that says deaf on the top of it, just so that people would see it and they would know, okay, she's deaf, I'll leave her alone. And that has really especially helped in the pandemic when we were wearing masks. It made it very difficult for me to communicate with people when everybody was wearing a mask. And even if I told somebody, I'm sorry, I can't hear you, I'm deaf, the mask is making it hard for me, they would just talk louder at me, and I would just try to reiterate, I have to read your lips. And then they would just like lean forward and shout even louder. And it makes it worse.
Right.
Wearing that cap has really helped me a lot in communicating out right off the bat that somebody knows I'm deaf. And it actually helped me because people avoid me then, because they just probably don't know that sign language, or they don't want to offend me, or they assume I know sign language and I need that. But it's also been a blessing, I think, really, just to you get to see people's true character as well when they learn that you have a disability, and they want to learn more, they want to know about you, they want to know the challenges and the barriers you've experienced, they want to know what your superpower is. I don't have a superpower. I think I'm very funny, but that's not the same as being a scratch golfer like Nick. And I think I've used humor a lot in my life to kind of deal with some of those uncomfortable situations. Nick, how about you?
Yeah. So Amy, you touched on a couple of things that I want to piggyback, because I take it in a little bit of a different light. I have not asked for a lot of accessibility, privileges, accommodations, and that's early on me through the world of academia. I feel like that environment is much more conducive to understanding and providing accommodations legally because they're bound to. One of my biggest fears was outside of graduating from college is going to the professional world, okay, where it's all about efficiency, it's all about bottom line. And I was terrified that employers would not have grace for what I had to deal with. And my worst nightmares came true, to be honest with you. I was let go of one of my first job out of college because I did not disclose the eye condition that I dealt with early enough. I did before I started, but ultimately got run up the chain of lawyers, and it was a liability that they weren't going to take on. And I'm not going to name the employer or anything like that, but you want to talk about a 22-year-old having his worst nightmares come true, hit him square in the face. That happened. They're never going to say legally that they let you go because of an eye condition you deal with, but we all know that that was the reason. There was another instance that actually fairly recently that I had a fairly prominent position with the company, and I was let go after 6 months because of, whether they want to admit it or not, they were uncomfortable with my eye condition. And it's interesting, like when you look at an employment perspective, in the back of my head, and one of the most terrifying things that I go through if I'm starting a new job or looking at moving, career paths is, am I joining a company that will embrace this and accept this? Because everyone's always got these fears about starting jobs, right? There's all sorts of nervousness that goes along with that. But I think what people don't realize as people with disabilities is there's a lot of companies out there that truly just don't care about people with disabilities. And let's be honest too, like discrimination is still very, very real. Okay. I know what American with Disabilities Act says. I know we're all supposed to abide by it. But the truth is, like, there's bias and there's discrimination. And that's something that's always in the back of my head. What was very refreshing, again, is a software company like Salesforce not only embraces it, but they even build their software too to be as inclusive and accessible as it possibly can. I think those are rarities in this world, and I shared this with you all. It was just very, very refreshing to see a company that kind of took that approach of like building it so that everyone could access the software, as opposed to, the norm is, hey, let's build it for the majority, and then these people are the afterthought, and we have to scramble to see how we can maybe tweak, our software to be more accessible. And one other thing too, Amy, just to comment, I totally did feel a tremendous amount of guilt, and I mentioned this to Stan numerous times, that I felt like I was taking seats away from maybe somebody that was completely blind or someone that had a wheelchair. And I did get a lot of dirty looks even at Dreamforce from, attendees that look and they're like, why is that guy sitting, in an accessible seat? I don't feel as comfortable, like, identifying myself as, someone that's disabled. I almost wish that maybe that is the right way to do it. I'm going about it the wrong way. But I've just never really asked for a lot of those, accommodations. It was great to have. It truly was. It alleviated so many fears that I had going into, different events. And Amy, you mentioned it too, just navigating, because I traveled, Dreamforce by myself. Usually I travel with my wife or with coworkers or whatever. And it's easy just seeing, the boards of, hey, what gate is your flight at? Or, checking in on a kiosk. Those are all challenging things that people just don't understand, that people with vision impairments deal with. And I truly do believe that I try to see the glass as half full, and I believe that inherently people are good and they want to help. I ask a lot of questions of people. I'm not shy of talking to people out of necessity. Um, but ultimately, too, there are some really bad people in the world too that aren't willing to help and you know, don't value people with disabilities. But again, at Dreamforce, I felt like I wasn't around those people. It was just super refreshing to see um, how valued I felt, and I think that was my greatest takeaway from Dreamforce. So that was a lot of me rambling, but I appreciate the space to kind of tell that story.
No, thank you. I I'd be interested to hear, and I think this is for a lot of us at Salesforce. This is kind of a selfish question, Nick. From is we of course in our world produce the documentation, but we also produce the videos, we produce the graphics, our team produces a lot of the content, right, that's used by customers like you who make everything possible for us at Salesforce. How can we do better? And it doesn't just have to be around the documentation, but how can Salesforce do better for Nick?
That's a really good question. Like I said, Salesforce has done a really, really good job. I will tell you one of my biggest pain points with any websites, any software platforms is when the screen gets skewed when you magnify resolution. You know, buttons get hidden, things of that nature. And again, my experience and my sensitivity is unique. You know, other people with other kinds of disabilities, it's not going to resonate with them. But really, more importantly, and Salesforce does a good job of this because it's, you know, for the most part HTML based, is I can magnify resolutions, font sizes, and still be able to function. Okay, there are a lot of different websites and, you know, platforms that I'll deal with that you can tell that they never thought about that. I worked for a company that moved to a CRM system that literally, because they did not bring that into consideration, I could not move forward with that CRM that they had. Okay. Ultimately, like it wasn't a deal killer. There was another platform I could work out of, but just thinking, and I know it's tough also from the corporate perspective, right? You know, this takes development, this takes dollars, but I think what Salesforce has done is they've built a platform thinking about accessibility at the start and then working from there, which again is unique. You know, they've got a lot of resources, they've got a lot of funding. But again, I truly wish that more companies would kind of build these platforms with that kind of roadmap. And I feel like the world would be a better place if we could do that.
Can I just jump in and piggyback off of that? Talking about building a platform from the beginning with accessibility in mind. Nick, I don't know if you used Maze Maps when we were at Dreamforce. Maze Maps was very much like Google Maps. It was in the event app where you could punch in your point of interest and it would generate a step-by-step map for you. And when I heard about this map, I was really nervous because I knew that we had people that were blind or have low vision. But then I found out that Maze Maps was actually created in conjunction with the blind nonprofit. So that it was made so that people with vision disability could use Maze Maps. And the most exciting part was that you could generate the step-by-step directions on how to get to a place, and then you could use text to speech to follow the steps and get to where you need to go. And this maze map was actually really helpful for anybody with a disability, whether they were overwhelmed or they, you know, couldn't see where the signs were or something like that. Maze maps were just really, really accessible and built with inclusivity in mind. And we are often now trying to meet with people so that they can build accessibility from the very beginning, whether they're making a presentation or a web page. I've learned so much about technical accessibility. And, you know, if you try to use a screen reader to read a web page, you really learn quickly how disorganized or organized it can be, you know, and so it really matters the order of which you're placing things when you're designing a web page or when you're creating a Google slide deck. So I just really wanted to piggyback off of what Nick was saying, because building accessibility in from the beginning makes it so much easier, and it's a lot cheaper. So you don't have to go back and make adjustments, or you don't have to go back and redesign the whole web page. And really collaborating with people with disabilities from the start is what gets you the best results. We think that we can review it on our own, but if you're not getting feedback from somebody who's actually experiencing that barrier, then you could miss a lot of opportunities for accessibility.
Because I learned so much from the two of you and other people that I encountered. Are there plans for the next Dreamforce? Plans to expand the operation, Amy?
I think so. This year for Dreamforce in 2023, it was the most accessible Dreamforce to date. We had so many accessible options for people with disabilities and medical conditions. It was just really incredible. So I think next year is going to be a great chance for us to kind of drill down on all of the things that we offer, really look for what works and what doesn't work. This year we tried a new program with the access card. This would allow people with disabilities to be able to get into a place a little earlier or go through an accessible entrance. In theory, it was a really great idea, and it was really awesome that security tried to work with that. But it also didn't work, because if someone didn't have the access card, then they couldn't get in and they couldn't use the accessible entrance. So just looking for opportunities where we can improve the accessibility layer that we have is going to be our biggest focus for next year.
Yeah, I kind of beg to differ. I felt like it worked great. Again, I'm not running the operations like you are. I felt like it was a flawed operation. And again, having the access to some things, I told you guys before, I felt a little bit guilty that I would, get to bypass a line or do whatever. I thought that was very, very nice. Amy, what you mentioned too as well. I mean, look, anybody that attends their first Dreamforce, they don't know what to expect. And I feel like, again, any normal event goer going into the first Dreamforce, I shared this comment with numerous people that were attending for the first time is, oh my God, this is overwhelming. I'm excited. I'm nervous. So you've got all those normal emotions, but then again, when you deal with a visual impairment, it just layers on and it probably amplifies some of those kind of emotions, which are all normal to have. I feel so much more prepared for my second Dreamforce, which I will be coming back. And even just interacting with your team, Amy, like I didn't know who was on the other side. I didn't truly know, how this was going to be handled. I mean, we had a call, prior to the event a couple weeks before. It started alleviating some of those fears. And then I really felt it when I was there that, oh my gosh, like I'm going to get everything that I possibly can as me, individual person representing from my company that I can. And I would say that's the biggest point that I want to hammer on is without Amy's team, Stan's support, who was my sighted guide through all of this, there is absolutely 100% unequivocally no way that I would have been able to get the knowledge and the value out of Dreamforce without their help. So really focusing on the ROI, like it's just immense that this team is in place, and it allows people like me to feel comfortable at an event like that and truly be able to get the most out of it and bring it back to my company and to implement some of the super cool things that I learned.
Thank you. This is a phenomenal discussion, and do either one of you have anything to add? Anything that you'd like to say?
Absolutely. I do want to add, I may be deaf and I may specialize in accessible events, but I learn something new every day, and I learn something huge at every event. And, you learn what works and what doesn't work. But I also have one person at every event that really just challenges my way of thinking. And for this time, it was Nick. Nick was the person who really just opened my eyes to there's such a broad spectrum of disabilities, and you cannot have this made up idea in your mind of what this person could look like. I don't know if I expected Nick to be walking with a white cane or what have you. And you know, when he walked up to the disability help desk, I was just not thinking it was going to be Nick. And it took me a couple of seconds to realize who it was. Um, you know, at a previous event, there was a man he was an Army veteran, and he had a spinal cord injury from being blown up by some roadside bomb. And it was just really eye-opening because he appeared to be non-disabled. But then I could tell after a while that he was struggling standing for a long time. He was struggling being in long lines, but he too also struggled with bypassing the long lines. He felt guilty. He felt like he was taking away a seat from somebody who maybe needed it more than him. And so I just really value meeting people that challenge my way of thinking. And, you know, I really try not to have any preconceived notions of what somebody's going to look like or what their abilities are going to be. And so I was just really happy to meet Nick and just really grateful that he shared a story with me. And I'm also grateful that he reached out to us ahead of time because that allowed us to work with him, that allowed us to get these things in place. And, you know, we try to help on the spot if someone has a last minute request, and sometimes we can't accommodate. So I'm just really glad that Nick was able to speak up and trust us. And even though he was nervous, he still came out and he still worked with us, and he was very gracious when things didn't work out well. Uh, and so I just really valued that experience.
That was another thing that I wanted to mention, and I failed to mention that too. Just transportation to the event. You know, I was somewhat late to the party to register. It was something that my company valued in me from a professional development perspective, and I will always be grateful for them sending me because it's not cheap to get out there. It's tough, especially for a smaller-ish company of our size. But like I was staying in Oakland, the event was in downtown San Francisco. Um, you know, I originally thought that I was going to have to take the BART, which there's some complexities and some challenges just boarding that. Getting the card, making sure I'm at the right stop, and all of that stuff. Amy and her team, provided a transportation number that I could call, text, and I'm blanking on the gentleman's name that I was talking to, my point person. He was absolutely amazing. I had a shuttle essentially every single day from my hotel directly to basically 50 feet away from where I walk into the event and the accessibility desk. That was very, very helpful for me. So I didn't want to, forget that. I'm grateful for that, accommodation. But just like Amy said, is like, disabilities come in all shapes, forms, and sizes. Don't assume anything with anybody. I get weird looks because, one of the things with my eye condition is I have a very hard time focusing on one single point in front of me. So my eyes will constantly kind of move. So a lot of times people will think, oh my God, this guy's not looking me in the eye. Like they'll look behind them, and it's something that's a coping mechanism that I have to deal with. And I get weird looks because of that. Don't judge, don't assume the worst. Have grace for people. And one of the cool things that I think, having a disability has helped me with, I have two little boys that are the apple of my eye. They're 5 and 8. Something cool that I've seen from an impact perspective of them growing up, knowing that their dad has a visual impairment, is my children have much, much more empathy for people that have disabilities. And like, if I do nothing as a parent, that makes me feel really cool. Quick story that I'll share. There's a kid in our neighborhood that they go to school with. I'm friends with his dad, and their son has autism. And he came up to me one day and he's like, "Hey, I just really appreciate your kids being so nice to my son, treating him like a normal kid." And I said, "Hey," I said, "Curtis," I go, "my kids don't see your kid as a kid with a disability or a kid with autism. They just see him as a loving, well-adjusted child that maybe his brain functions a little bit differently." And I feel like if everyone could kind of take that approach and that level of grace, the world would be a better place. And I'm sorry, I'm tearing up just thinking about it, but it's just it hits home, and a lot of us it does. But again, like if we could all have that approach, and I think we're getting there too. I really do. There's been a lot of momentum for the cause, um, you know, and it makes me happy. It makes me feel optimistic for the future because when my disability, was discovered, to be quite frank with you, I didn't have that level of optimism that I was going to be able to function through life and to excel and succeed. But I'm excited for what's going on in the community.
Well, I cannot add anything to what you two have said. I've learned so much. So thank you. I'm really lucky to have met you, and I look forward to working again, Amy, with you the next time. And Nick, I look forward to seeing you outside of work, since we live somewhat close. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you both. I think this is really good, and
And thank you for getting us together and getting our message out there. I think Nick and I know I feel more passionate about what we do. It's really hard for me to advocate for myself, but advocating for others is what gives me purpose in this job. So talking to people like Nick just kind of helped me keep that fire going.
Keep going. We need more people like you and what you do. And again, your team, I told you all this too. And is there something bigger that I could be doing with my life of advancing this? And it's really, even coming back from Dreamforce, had me thinking about, like, what's my purpose? What's my impact in the world? And Amy, just know, again, your impact is greatly felt, and you need stories like this. And you guys probably won't know really ultimately how that lasts long term, but it's made a profound impact, not only in that event, but again, just knowing that there are companies and people that care out there, because it's very, very easy to get into kind of a jaded mindset with this. Amy, I'm sure you know that. And you have to prevent yourself, and you need the light in your life. You really do, because it re-energizes you, and it's like, you know what, I'm gonna be okay tonight. And I think we all need reminders of that. So,
well, look, thank you both. Appreciate your time very much. And this is a great, Mark's always talking about telling stories. These are great stories, and people learn by stories, and you being willing to share your stories, it's really amazing. So thank you.
Awesome. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yep.
You too.
Soon.
All right.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, guys.